Her son shoved her walker into the wall and called her dead weight on speakerphone. Nora Jennings, retired hospice nurse and homeowner of 37 years, didn't flinch. Jason thought her slowness meant surrender, but she'd already rewritten the will, revoked his access, and installed the cameras. By the time he tried to declare her incompetent, Nora had receipts, recordings, and a notarized binder. She wasn't losing her mind. She was building her case. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The hallway light flickered again, third time this week, but Nora didn't rush to fix it. Her walker's rubber wheels made their usual soft squeak against the old hardwood, a sound she'd grown used to. She paused halfway between the kitchen and the den, breathing steady, listening for Jason's voice. He'd been on another phone call earlier, pacing, swearing under his breath about something or someone. Lately, his voice filled the house more than her own. As she inched forward, the sharp snap of his sneakers on the stairs cut through the silence. Then, slam. A hand shoved the walker sideways, hard. The metal frame clattered against the wall with a metallic thud. "Jesus, you slow everything down," Jason muttered, not even glancing at her as he barreled past, taking the stairs two at a time. Nora stumbled, her fingers grazing the wallpaper, searching for balance. Her knees wobbled under her. For a second, she wasn't 74. She was 7, clinging to a banister, trying not to fall. She didn't call after him. She didn't need to. Instead, she stood still, listening to the slam of the front door and the echo it left behind in the house. Her breathing came quiet but ragged, like the creak of an old rocking chair she used to nurse Jason in, when his legs were too short to reach the floor, when his mouth only knew how to ask, not accuse. She took another slow step forward, then another. In the den, she lowered herself into her chair, not the recliner Jason now claimed as his own. She adjusted the cushion behind her lower back and rested her hands in her lap. The silence was heavy, but she knew how to carry weight. The afternoon sun pushed through the gauzy curtains, painting the floor in light. Dust hung in the air, dancing like time itself, always moving, always ignoring who it leaves behind. Her eyes drifted to the walnut desk against the far wall. She had moved it in there after her husband died, filling the drawers with letters, bank statements, and documents too sacred to shred. The second drawer on the left creaked when opened. It always had, ever since they bought it at that estate sale in Mariemont 20 years ago. She reached out, pulled it open, and ran her fingers over the thick envelope inside. The will. She slid it out. The paper felt heavier than it had the last time she read it. Her name. Jason's. The tidy signatures. The notary seal. Her late husband had wanted everything to go to Jason. They both had. It felt fair then, back when Jason brought her flowers after his first promotion, back when he called her 3 times a week from Atlanta just to tell her how well his kids were doing in school, back when he'd kneel beside her chair and call her Mom like it meant something sacred. Now he called her a logistical nightmare to his friend on speakerphone. Nora smoothed the edges of the paper with her palm. A wrinkle in the corner reminded her of a burn mark, small but permanent. Her hand didn't shake as she placed the envelope back inside the drawer, but her jaw clenched. She closed the drawer slowly, deliberately. It made the same creaking sound, but now it sounded like something breaking open, not closing shut. Upstairs, Jason's door stood ajar. His duffel bag was still by the banister, half-zipped, as if he might leave at any moment. But he never did. He'd stayed, he'd settled, he'd spread, and now he'd shoved her. Nora looked down at her palms. Faint liver spots dotted the skin, but they still remembered the weight of a child. Still remembered holding his fevered forehead when he cried. Still remembered the lullabies, the bedtime stories. And now they remembered the cold metal of a walker being shoved aside like trash. She sat a little taller. Tomorrow, she'd call Ellen. It was supposed to be for a few weeks. That's what Jason had said when he showed up with his suit jackets in dry cleaner bags and a forced laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Just until I figure things out," he'd promised, glancing around her living room like it was a crash pad. That was 16 months ago. Now his shoes lined the entryway like soldiers, his shaving kit had colonized the upstairs bathroom, and her fridge, once neatly labeled with containers of soup and low-sodium leftovers, was a jumble of energy drinks, cold cuts, and takeout cartons sealed with grease. Nora stood in front of the open fridge now, unsure whether she was hungry or just looking for something to feel like hers again. Jason had taken over in quiet, consistent ways. The thermostat no longer sat at 72. He bumped it down to save on bills. Her mail now came in crumpled stacks, rifled through before she got to it. Her favorite quilt disappeared one day and reappeared folded in the trunk of his car. "You weren't using it," he'd said. He wasn't cruel in the obvious ways, not yet. But Nora had spent her career in hospice care. She knew the early signs of decline, whether it was in the human body or the human heart. Jason's kindness hadn't died all at once. It had withered, faded, been absorbed into his own convenience. And then there was the phone call. She hadn't meant to overhear. She never did. But she'd come into the hall that evening to ask if he wanted tea and froze when she heard her name. "No, I'm still stuck here with her," Jason had said. He chuckled. Yeah, I know. Dead weight, man. Literal dead weight. I swear the woman's like molasses in human form." Her throat closed. The walker felt heavier than usual that night. She hadn't said anything, just turned and wheeled herself back to her room, holding the sides a little tighter than usual. Some truths needed no confrontation. Some wounds, when sliced open, didn't bleed. They just leaked history. That Sunday, she dressed in charcoal gray slacks, a blouse with pearl buttons and sensible flats. She didn't tell Jason where she was going. At the bank, she smiled politely at the teller and asked for a private consultation. The estate advisor, a woman named Karen with kind eyes and sharp posture, welcomed her into a quiet office. "Yes, your estate is still structured as you originally said it, Mrs. Jennings," Karen said after a moment. "Your son remains the primary beneficiary on file. No changes have been made since, let me see, Ikibin Ondokas." Nora nodded. "And it's revocable, correct?" "Entirely. You can amend it at any time." She left the bank with a business card tucked in her wallet and a strange calm settling over her like morning fog, not erasing anything, just softening the edges until she could move through them. That night, Jason was stretched across her couch, one foot resting on the armrest, scrolling through his phone like the room owed him quiet. He didn't ask where she'd been. She moved past him, walker slow and steady, her mind already working through timelines and phone calls. When she reached her bedroom, she opened the drawer again and looked at the will. Not to read it this time, but to feel it, to remind herself it was hers. That paper, those decisions. They didn't belong to Jason. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She slipped it back into the drawer and stood for a moment listening. In the hallway, Jason's voice murmured again. Low, careless. "Yeah, she's still alive. Barely." Nora turned off the light. Her hands didn't shake, but her resolve sharpened like a scalpel. The last mortgage payment had been made on a Wednesday morning, 5 years after Harold passed. Nora remembered the date, September 14th, because she'd baked a lemon bundt cake and eaten 2 slices before even calling the bank to confirm. She'd sat at the kitchen table with a check stub in one hand and a photograph of Harold in the other, whispering, "We did it, hun." The deed had arrived in the mail a week later. She'd framed a copy and tucked the original away with her marriage license, tax returns, and her son's birth certificate. The house was hers. Entirely. No shared ownership, no liens, no co-signers. Just Nora Jennings printed cleanly across the top in black ink. So when Jason said, "I'll repaint the living room next weekend. This beige is depressing," she blinked at him like he'd spoken another language. "Excuse me?" she said from her chair, tea in hand. "I've already got the swatches," he continued, unfazed. "Thinking a deep slate gray, modern but cozy." She hadn't agreed. But the following Saturday, the living room smelled of primer, and her favorite doilies were balled up in the trash. He'd painted around her without ever asking if she wanted it done. When she pointed out that the baseboards were still streaked with beige, he grinned and said, Details, Mom. Big picture stuff is what matters. The changes multiplied. He replaced her rotary phone with a voice-activated assistant that answered questions she never asked. Her recliner was moved, then upgraded, to something firmer, sleeker, but cold and foreign to her back. His clothes began taking up closet space in the guest room, and then hers. And then her calendar started filling up with his appointments. He'd already made himself at home. Now he was trying to rebrand it. One night, after a particularly tense dinner where he'd criticized the old person's smell of the house, right after she lit her lavender candle, Nora retreated to her bedroom. She opened her nightstand drawer and pulled out the leather-bound journal she'd once used to track Harold's medication schedule. She flipped to a blank page. February 9. Jason called the quilt shabby and said he donated it without asking. She kept writing. March 2nd, found my mail already opened, tax form missing. March 15th, replaced the front door wreath with a motion camera. No warning. The entries accumulated, each one a small betrayal disguised as convenience or care. Nora didn't want to believe it, not fully. But the house had always been her sanctuary, not his sandbox. And if she didn't start documenting what was happening, who would believe her when things unraveled? The call to Ellen wasn't easy. They hadn't spoken much outside of Christmas cards in recent years, but Nora trusted her. Ellen had drawn up her original will after all. She still signed her letters with a smiley face next to her name. They arranged a quiet lunch under the guise of catching up. Ellen sipped iced tea, set her bag beside her chair, and listened with a stillness Nora envied. By dessert, Ellen was already talking logistics. "We'll set a date. Quietly. You won't need to come to the office. We'll handle it here." The new will would be drafted at Nora's kitchen table. That night, Jason made spaghetti. He cooked only when he wanted something, Nora had noticed. As he ladled sauce onto her plate, he grinned wide. "Better eat up. Gotta stay alive long enough for the inheritance to kick in." The fork paused mid-air. He laughed, too loud. "I'm kidding, obviously." But Nora had spent too long with dying people not to recognize the tone of someone imagining what came after her. She forced a smile, then excused herself early. Her appetite had vanished. Later, she tore out a blank page from the back of her journal and wrote in block letters, "This is my house. My name is on every beam, brick, and board." She folded it, placed it inside the kitchen drawer where she kept the matches, and shut it slowly. Nora left the fridge open for 23 minutes on purpose. Jason was on his second beer, feet up on the ottoman he never asked to claim, scrolling through his phone like he was doing the house a favor by existing. The fridge beeped twice, slow, mournful sounds, and only then did Nora shuffle back in, startled. "Oh, was that me?" she said, blinking at the open door. Jason didn't even look up. "Yeah, Mom." Again. She nodded, expression loose. "I'll write a sticky note for next time." The Post-it never made it onto the fridge, but Jason's assumptions did. Over the next week, she forgot the names of TV shows, the date of her last doctor's appointment, and whether or not she'd taken her blood pressure meds, right in front of him. She watched his confidence rise in direct proportion to her supposed decline. "She's slipping," he told someone on the phone, just loud enough for her to hear through the den vent. "You know how it goes. The fog sets in, then the confusion, then the meds pile up. She's a ticking checkbook." The words echoed longer than they should have. Nora stood in the hallway in her socks, still holding the whiteout she'd come for. Her fingers tightened around the little bottle until the cap cracked. He'd said it like she wasn't real, like she was inventory. That night, she called Ellen. The plan came together quickly, quietly. They met at the branch office 2 towns over, Ellen's idea. Nora wore sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat like she was someone famous, someone with something to lose. "I want to fund something real," Nora said, "something that lasts longer than him scrolling through my bank account." They set up the paperwork in less than an hour. Nora's IRA would be split across 3 future nursing scholarships. One would bear her name, another Harold's. "And the third?" Ellen asked, tapping her pen. Nora smiled. "For whoever needs it most." When she returned home, Jason was gone, off to the gym, or a bar, or wherever he vanished to on Thursdays. She went straight to the home office. The filing cabinet squeaked open like an old secret. She pulled folder after folder into a pile on the carpet. Tax returns, appliance manuals, clipped coupons from newspapers she didn't even subscribe to anymore. Somewhere, she knew, were things Jason might try to get his hands on: backup banking records, old power of attorney forms, letters from Harold's estate lawyer. She fed them through the shredder slowly, deliberately, watching paper curl into fine, dry ribbons. She worked for nearly an hour, careful to keep the lid on the bin just in case Jason came back early. When she finished, she emptied the contents into a garbage bag, layered it under cat litter in the outside bin. He never checked that one. The next day, while Jason napped on the couch, TV blaring some courtroom drama Nora found insulting, she set up 2 discreet security cameras. One near the office door, another angled just so, tucked into the spine of a book on the den's highest shelf. Harold had taught her how to use discreet tech when they'd traveled cross-country in an RV. "Trust's a funny thing," he'd told her once in Nebraska. "Easy to give, hard to win back." By the time Jason woke up, scratching his neck and asking about dinner, Nora had already tested both feeds from her tablet. "Did we have leftover stew?" he asked, yawning. "Or is tonight one of those salad with a side of air evenings?" She turned to him, all soft smile and soft voice. "There's chili, I think. Let me check." He didn't notice how sharp her memory became when he wasn't looking. After dinner, he retreated to the upstairs bathroom. She heard him laughing over speakerphone, the sound bouncing down the stairwell. "I'm just biding my time, bro," Jason said. "Sooner or later old girl's gonna forget how to unlock the front door and boom, guess who's got a 5-bedroom with no mortgage?" Nora closed her eyes. Then she reached under her chair cushion and pulled out her leather journal. April 18th. Old girl. 5-bedroom. Biding time. Installed cameras today. They work perfectly. She stared at the last sentence, then added one more. "I'm the one biding time now." The clinic's waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and eucalyptus, soothing on the surface, clinical underneath. Nora sat in the corner, her walker parked neatly beside her, a manila folder in her lap. She wore lipstick that day, not red, not too bold. Just enough to say, "I'm present. I remember who I am." When Dr. Arnett called her in, Nora closed the folder and stood slowly. Her spine ached, but her gaze didn't waver. "I need a favor," she said once the door closed behind them. "Not medical, not quite." 10 minutes later, the request was formal. Her records, from prescriptions to mental wellness notes, were now flagged. Confidential access only. Jason couldn't get near them without her explicit permission. "I know it seems drastic," she told Dr. Arnett, eyes firm, "but peace of mind doesn't come from denial." The doctor didn't argue. Nora had been his patient for a decade. He knew better than to assume she was confused. That evening, Ellen called. "I found something," she said, voice clipped. Jason had submitted a digital power of attorney request through a site Nora had never heard of. The signature on the form? A poor replica of her own, traced from a driver's license scan Nora never remembered giving him access to. Ellen tracked the forgery back to a shady notarization proxy service based out of Florida. Unregulated, shady, just enough smoke to hide behind. "We'll document it," Ellen said. "You're covered legally for now, but he's looking to cut corners." Nora hung up, heart beating not with fear but with confirmation. The next morning, she forgot to take her blood pressure medication. She left the orange pill bottle on the counter, right next to the toaster Jason used every morning. When he came down, bleary-eyed, rubbing the back of his neck, he glanced at it but said nothing. By noon, the bottle was still there. She knocked it over accidentally that evening, pills scattering across the tile. Jason stepped over them like crumbs. "You're supposed to use the dispenser," he said. "Not rocket science." Nora blinked, made her face go soft. "I'll try to remember." But she already had. What Jason didn't see, what he didn't care to see, was the sharpening quiet in her body. She used to think silence was something that settled in old houses and older women. Now she knew it could be weaponized. In the days that followed, Jason spoke less. He stopped calling her Mom. Sometimes he didn't say anything at all when he came home, just grunted, nodded, disappeared upstairs. But the phone calls picked up. Nora was careful, but not obvious. She'd pause in the hallway, dust a picture frame, fiddle with the thermostat. Once, she adjusted a curtain rod for no reason at all, just to catch what she needed. "Yeah, long-term care's expensive," Jason muttered one evening, pacing. "But if she's deteriorating, there are options, facilities, home-to-home transitions. Look into it for me, would you?" A beat of silence. "Yeah," quietly. Nora held the curtain rod a little tighter. Not because she needed balance, but because it was either that or break something. Later that night, long after Jason's door creaked shut upstairs, she pushed her walker into the backyard. She started with one lap around the garden path, then another. The wind was sharp but bracing. Her legs shook but held. She counted each step in her head. One for Harold, one for herself, one for every lie Jason told in her house. By the sixth lap, her chest burned, but her chin lifted. In the distance, the porch light flickered. Jason had probably forgotten to change the bulb again. She looked up at it, squarely. Let it flicker. She wouldn't. Nora set the teacups down gently, porcelain clinking against the wooden kitchen table. Ellen sat across from her, blazer crisp, laptop open, the notary pad already beside her elbow. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows in low, hollow bursts, like the house itself was holding its breath. They didn't speak at first. There was no need. The folder between them said enough. Nora opened it and pulled out the fresh will, newly printed, still smelling faintly of toner. Her hands were steady. Ellen watched her, pen ready. "You sure about this?" she asked, gently but firmly. "I was sure the day he shoved my walker," Nora replied. She didn't need to reread it, but she did anyway. Line by line, each clause like a stitch pulling her back into control. The bulk of her estate would fund the scholarships they'd set up last month. A portion would go to her sister-in-law, Beverly, the only person who had shown up every year for Harold's memorial. Jason's name appeared only once. "To Jason Jennings, my biological son, $1. This sum is intentional and final." When it was time, she signed slowly, clearly, like a woman whose name still meant something. The notary stamped the last page with a sharp press. It echoed louder than it should have. It was done. Ellen closed the folder and slid it back toward her. "You're in good shape, Nora. Legally, structurally. But if he pushes again, I want documentation of every incident going forward." Nora smiled faintly. "Already ahead of you." Later that afternoon, Nora logged into every financial account she owned. Her credit union, her brokerage, her life insurance. Each one had Jason listed as a beneficiary from years ago. Each one gave her the same satisfaction as she removed his name and replaced it with new ones. Ellen as power of attorney. The scholarship trust. A young social worker she'd met through her doctor, listed as a secondary backup in case anything ever happened to Ellen. Then she moved on to the home insurance policy. Jason had convinced her, months ago, to add him as a household member, citing something about disaster coverage. Just in case the roof caves in, he'd joked. Now she removed him with 2 clicks and a signature. Let the roof fall. She knew how to stand under weight. Once everything was updated, she uploaded digital copies of the will, the POA, and the revised policies to a secure cloud vault Ellen had set up for her. Password protected, geo-encrypted, double verified. Jason wouldn't even know where to begin looking. She sat back in her chair, letting the late afternoon sun warm her cheeks through the window. The house felt quieter somehow. Not hollow, but clean, like it had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Upstairs, Jason's door creaked open. His footsteps were heavy, methodical. He thudded down the stairs and paused when he saw her at the table. "You've been busy?" he said, eyeing the open laptop. Nora smiled. "Just house stuff, spring maintenance, boring." He didn't push, just nodded and opened the fridge. As he rustled through the containers, Nora tilted the screen slightly and clicked the upload confirmation one last time. Final file uploaded. Last will NJ, full revoked June 2025.pdf. Her cursor hovered for a moment, then she closed the lid. Jason turned, holding a beer. "You need anything?" Nora shook her head. "I'm just fine." And for the first time in a long time, she meant it. That night, she didn't write in her journal. Instead, she sat in the den and watched a classic black-and-white movie, feet tucked beneath a throw blanket Jason hadn't touched yet. The dog in the film barked at a burglar. The woman screamed. The hero showed up. Nora didn't flinch. She wasn't waiting to be saved. She was rewriting the story before the villain even realized the plot had changed. The email wasn't addressed to her. That was the first thing Nora noticed. It was a forwarded thread. 2 replies deep. The kind you send when you're confident the person you're writing about will never see it. Jason had left his Gmail open on the family desktop again. Arrogance made people sloppy. The subject line read, "Long-term planning. Tom says discreet is doable." Nora scrolled slowly, her fingertip trembling only once, and not from age. Jason had written to someone named Tom, discreet transports asking about elder transitions. He used phrases like minimal resistance, no prior warning necessary, and paperwork pending depending on capacity sign-off. It read less like a son seeking care and more like a landlord organizing a furniture removal. At the bottom, a PDF was attached. Bright Pine Intake, Evaluation Prep Sheet. Her name was already filled in. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply forwarded the entire email chain to Ellen with one line of text. "He's not waiting. He's planning." Then she cleared her browsing history, closed the screen, and stared at her own reflection in the darkened glass. The kitchen light cast her in outline, shoulders tight, lips thin, eyes steady. The reply from Ellen came within 15 minutes. "Nora, you can't wait any longer. You need to secure your documents and prepare to exit. If he's coordinating transport, that's a threat. Period." That word stuck in her head. Exit, like it belonged to a war plan, not a widow with arthritis. But war had already arrived at her doorstep, quiet, casual, wearing gym shorts and a smug smirk. She opened the linen closet and pulled out her rolling suitcase. It still smelled faintly of Florida, sand, and Harold's cologne. She unzipped it and started folding. No clothes, yet, just papers, originals. ID's Harold's military record, marriage license, her birth certificate, Ellen's notarized letters, anything Jason might try to misplace if things turned ugly. She scanned copies of everything using the old brother printer in the den, saving each file with cold precision. N. Jennings Living Will.pdf, POA 2025 Ellen Verified.pdf, House Deed Solo Title NJ.pdf. Each file name felt like a brick stacked between her and the abyss Jason was digging. The next day, she called the post office. "I'd like to open a personal P.O. box," she told the clerk, "for some private mail." The young woman behind the counter didn't ask questions. People her age rarely did when older women looked them in the eye with purpose. Nora chose a box near the back wall. It felt protected somehow, less likely to be noticed. She memorized the number. The key felt warm in her hand, solid. Heron. That night, Jason asked what the envelope on the table was. "Oh, just redirecting some mail," Nora said lightly, tucking it into her purse. "Catalogs, mostly." He shrugged and cracked open a beer. But Nora could feel it. The shift, the way he was watching her now, not out of care, but calculation. She caught him glancing at the hallway closet where her medications were kept. She started locking it at night. On Thursday, she scheduled a cognitive exam with Dr. Arnett, not because she feared her mind was slipping, because she wanted proof it wasn't. "I need it in writing," she told him, sharp as ever. "Put that down." He chuckled but nodded. "You want this notarized?" "Twice," she said, "if you can swing it." He gave her a full evaluation, verbal recall, object association, even the clock test she used to administer to patients in hospice when families weren't ready to accept the truth. She passed with room to spare. When it was over, she took the printout in both hands, pressed it flat, and slid it into a new folder labeled Mind and Medical. She would add it to the others in the suitcase that night. Friday came with silence. Jason barely spoke. Nora didn't trust it. Quiet wasn't peace anymore, it was prelude. That evening, she stood in her bedroom with the curtains half drawn and listened to the stair creak under Jason's weight. 1 step, 2, a pause, then his voice, low and almost cheerful. "Hey, Mom, got a surprise for you tomorrow." She didn't turn around. Nora wore navy that morning. Not black, she wasn't mourning. Not gray, she wasn't unsure. Navy was for dignity, for war rooms and witness stands, the kind of color that didn't ask for power, but didn't give it away either. The state investigator arrived right on time, a woman in her early 40s named Simone Barnes. Low heels, high bun, no nonsense. She shook Nora's hand firmly and didn't speak in the syrupy tone people sometimes used with seniors. That alone earned Nora's respect. They sat at the dining table side by side, not across. Nora appreciated the angle. Less interrogation, more collaboration. "I understand your son has initiated preliminary guardianship paperwork," Simone began, opening a slim, government-stamped file. "Before anything's acted on, we're obligated to evaluate you directly." "I requested this visit," Nora said. "Proactive clarity." She pushed forward a leather binder she'd spent 4 nights assembling. Simone opened it. Inside, timestamps, logs, digital photos, transcripts of overheard conversations, and notarized letters. The cover page read, "Evidence of Coercive Control and Preemptive Financial Reallocation, N. Jennings." There were printouts from her security cameras, Jason flipping through her desk drawers when he thought she was asleep, audio files saved to a flash drive with labels like April 2nd, verbal mockery, kitchen, and May 12th, Jason phone convo replacement. There was even a document showing the forged online POA application, annotated by Ellen. "Here's the medication chart," Nora added, sliding over a separate sheet. "You'll note the intentional errors I made and his indifference to each." Simone flipped through the pages, one brow lifting. She paused at a quote Jason had made during a phone call. "If she gets confused at the right moment, that's legal gold." She looked at Nora. "You've been very thorough." "I worked hospice for 27 years, Nora said, voice calm. "I've seen what happens when people don't believe women once they're over 70 and slow to climb stairs. I learned to bring receipts." Simone gave a small nod, almost a smile. "This may be the cleanest file I've seen in months." Jason was still upstairs. He had no idea a state investigator had just been inside the house. No idea his carefully timed power play was unraveling like a cheap suit. When Simone left, Nora followed her to the front door and watched her car pull away. She didn't wave. Back inside, her phone buzzed with a message from Ellen. "Motion filed this morning. Guardianship challenge blocked until further review. You're safe. For now." Nora exhaled slowly. Not relief, momentum. She rolled her walker into the garage and pulled down the box labeled Emergency Prep. Inside, flashlights, water bottles, batteries, and a brand new door security bar. Jason had always laughed at it when it arrived from Amazon. "What, expecting a break-in?" he'd asked. Now she installed it in silence. When the bar clicked into place beneath the knob of her bedroom door, something inside her clicked too. That night, she slept with her phone on her pillow, the binder beside her on the nightstand. Her heart beat slow, steady, but never fully at rest. At 2:43 a.m., the hallway floor groaned. Nora opened her eyes but didn't move. Jason's shadow passed under her door. He paused. The knob turned once, then stopped. The bar held. She stared at the ceiling, heart hammering, not from fear but clarity. In the morning, she'd tell Ellen everything, even the part about the door, especially that. The courtroom was cooler than expected, with institutional carpeting and fluorescent lights that gave everyone the same pale, washed-out hue. Nora sat straight in the second row behind the petitioner's table, her walker folded beside her chair. She wore charcoal slacks, a slate blue blouse, and a gray wool blazer with a single silver pin shaped like a caduceus, an old gift from Harold the year she'd retired. Jason stood across the room in a navy suit he'd clearly borrowed. It didn't quite fit across the shoulders, and his tie was too short. He kept adjusting it, tugging at the knot like it might save him. The bailiff called the hearing to order. Jason's attorney, a man who looked like he'd been hired by email and paid in monthly installments, stood first. Your Honor, this is a straightforward guardianship request on behalf of a concerned son. Our position is that Mrs. Jennings, while once highly competent, has shown increased confusion, behavioral inconsistency, and poor judgment. Jason nodded solemnly, almost managing sincerity. I'm all she has, he added, voice low, plaintive. This is about making sure she's protected. The judge turned to Nora. Ma'am, would you like to speak on your own behalf before counsel begins? Nora stood carefully, but without hesitation. Her voice was even, with the edge of a blade wrapped in velvet. My name is Nora Jennings. I'm 74. I'm a retired hospice nurse. I paid off my mortgage without help. I can tell you the dosage, interactions, and half-life of every pill in my weekly organizer, and I don't need protection from my own competence. A rustle passed through the gallery. 2 elder advocates from the county had shown up unannounced to observe. Ellen stood and clicked her remote. The small screen positioned to the judge's right came alive with a time-stamped audio clip. Jason's voice filled the room. She's a ticking checkbook. Click. Just biding my time, bro. Click. If she gets confused at the right moment, that's legal gold. Jason flinched. His lawyer stiffened. Your Honor, Ellen said, stepping forward, in addition to this audio, we've submitted documentation of attempted forgery of a power of attorney, surveillance showing the petitioner accessing private documents, and a verified cognitive assessment performed by Dr. Michael Arnett, board-certified and on record, confirming Ms. Jennings's full lucidity. She laid 3 documents on the bench. Each bore official seals. Nora followed with her own binder. Her hands didn't shake as she opened it and pulled out highlighted logs, photographs, and a statement from her former estate planner. I kept records, she said simply, because I've seen how truth can be ignored when it's coming from someone old, female, and inconvenient. Jason stood suddenly. She's rehearsed. She's had help. She's faking it. Mr. Jennings, the judge said calmly, you'll sit or be removed. Jason's mouth opened, then closed. The judge looked between them, then down at the documents, flipping through with care. The room fell into one of those silences only courtrooms know, where futures hang in balance and clocks tick louder than logic. Finally, the judge spoke. This court finds no grounds for guardianship. Ms. Jennings retains full legal autonomy. Any future filings of a similar nature without new, credible evidence will be treated as harassment. The gavel came down, one clean crack. Jason turned toward Nora. His face was red. So that's it? You're just going to pretend I don't care about you? Nora looked at him evenly. You cared about what I had, not what I needed. She didn't wait for his reply. She folded her binder, lifted her walker, and walked out under her own power. In the hallway, Ellen exhaled audibly. You did it. No, Nora said, her eyes narrowing as she looked out. The window at Jason pacing alone on the courthouse steps. He just lost. The envelope sat on the dining room table when Jason came downstairs, still in basketball shorts, eyes swollen from whatever drink had dragged him to sleep. The blinds were open, light pouring in. Nora had made sure of that. Truth looks best under full sun. Jason squinted, picked up the envelope, and slid out a single typed page. His lips moved silently as he read. Then his eyebrows rose. You've got to be kidding me. Nora didn't look up from the kitchen sink. She was rinsing out the coffee pot with deliberate calm. You're evicting me? No, she said, turning now, drying her hands on a floral dish towel. You're removing yourself. I'm just enforcing the timeline. Jason flung the page onto the counter. You're using that stupid agreement? That rental thing from 2 years ago? That was a formality. Hell, you barely made me sign it. I made you, she said, and I kept it. His face flushed. This is because of the court thing, isn't it? You're punishing me. No, Jason, she said, stepping closer, voice low but unwavering. This is because you broke the one rule that matters in this house. He scoffed. Which is what? That I didn't fluff your pillows enough? Nora's eyes narrowed. That you thought you could erase me before I was gone. Jason stood there, hands clenched at his sides. I took care of you. No, she said, her voice calm and surgical. "You rearranged me. You positioned me like furniture. You calculated my expiration. And you betrayed yourself the minute you shoved my walker." For a second, neither of them moved. Then Jason laughed, a single humorless exhale. "Where do you think I'm supposed to go?" "That," Nora said, walking past him with her walker steady and her back straight, "is no longer my problem." She spent the rest of the morning reclaiming space. The spare bedroom, his makeshift office and man cave, was stripped first. His boxes were packed neatly and lined up in the hallway. His world's best dad mug now sat on the porch rail next to a roll of bubble wrap and a note that read, "Please take all of it." By noon, she had scheduled a locksmith. By 3, the locks were changed. The new key turned in her hand with an unfamiliar but satisfying click. In the basement, she reopened the paint cans Jason had sealed up months ago when he painted over her soft, beige walls with a shade he called Modern Storm. She rolled on layers of honeyed cream until the house began to look like itself again. The brush strokes were slow, uneven, but deliberate. The doorbell rang once, then again. Jason stood on the porch, arms crossed. "You're making a huge mistake," he said. "I've made plenty," she replied. "Letting you stay this long was one." He didn't step inside. She didn't invite him. Later that week, she rearranged the living room furniture, moved her recliner back under the reading lamp, took down the framed concert poster Jason had hung above the fireplace, and replaced it with her wedding photo. Neighbors began stopping by. Mrs. Keegan from across the street brought lemon squares. Mr. Callahan offered to help carry boxes. "We saw the way he talked to you," he said quietly. "We just didn't know if it was our place." Nora smiled, tired but resolute. "It is now." Each room she touched felt less haunted. Each drawer she cleared, each rug she shook out, erased the ghost of a man who was still technically alive, but already gone. Nora stood at the threshold of what had been Jason's room. The carpet still bore the indentation of his dumbbells, and the closet door creaked the same way it had before he filled it with flannel shirts and excuses. The air held a faint trace of cologne, cheap and sharp, and beneath it, the stale musk of indifference. For weeks she'd kept the door shut. Now it stood wide open, the sunlight flooding in like an invitation. She crossed the doorway slowly and parked her walker beside the stripped bed frame. One hand smoothed the windowsill, her fingers trailing across the chipped paint Jason had never bothered to fix. This room had once belonged to a sun, then to a shadow. Now it would belong to her. By evening, the twin mattress had been replaced with a queen. She added a soft rug underfoot, the kind Harold used to sink his toes into after long shifts at the VA hospital. She filled the shelves not with sports trophies and finance books, but with hardcovers she actually loved. Welty, Baldwin, Didion. She placed a speaker on the dresser and let it play Ella Fitzgerald quietly as she unpacked her last box. No more news channels, no more late-night infomercials blaring from the living room, just music and breath and space that finally felt hers again. In the corner of the room, she set up a plant stand and gave each potted fern its own little stretch of light. She watched the leaves flutter in the breeze like something alive finally exhaling. Later that night, she sat by the window with her laptop open, writing the emails she'd been meaning to send. One to Ellen, with the subject line, "Still standing. I meant it when I said I'd keep records, but I want to thank you for helping me write new ones too. N. And another to Dr. Arnett, thanking him for his quiet patience and sharper-than-it-looks clipboard. The next day, she joined a virtual support group recommended by the county resource coordinator. The login screen asked for a first name and a pseudonym. She typed, "Nora, Cincinnati, Ohio, reclaimed." The session included 12 squares on a screen, men and women with tired eyes, guarded voices, and shared scars. One woman from Pennsylvania spoke of a son who'd tried to sell her wedding ring. A man from Oregon whispered about a niece who'd drained his pension. When it was Nora's turn, she smiled gently and said, "I stayed silent until silence became agreement. I don't agree anymore." The moderator nodded, and one of the other women gave a quiet thumbs up. It was the kindest Nora had felt in months. By Sunday, she was sketching out a guest list on a legal pad. The first annual Harold Jennings Memorial Scholarship Brunch, tentatively set for mid-July on the back patio, beneath the wind chime Harold had installed himself. No formal invites, just handwritten notes. Nora would bake the lemon bundt cake herself. She paused between lines and thought about motherhood, not with bitterness, but precision. What she gave, what she allowed, what she inherited, what she lost. She did not miss the fantasy of Jason. She missed who she once hoped he'd become. The doorbell rang mid-afternoon. She wasn't expecting anyone. Outside, the porch was empty. No car, no figure retreating down the sidewalk. Just a single envelope, yellowed and slightly bent, with no return address. Nora picked it up and opened it slowly. Inside, a typed note on thick cardstock. "He's trying again. Through Cousin Paul. You deserve to know." Her hand trembled. Not with fear, but fury. Paul, the estranged cousin from Harold's side. They hadn't spoken in over a decade, not since Paul showed up late to the funeral and left before the eulogy. Jason had once referred to him as the drunk with a fax machine. She looked down at the envelope again. Tucked beneath the note was a copy of what looked like a legal petition draft, with Jason's name typed alongside Paul's. A fresh attempt, a new angle. But the signature? That wasn't Paul's. It was forged. The number still worked. Nora stared at the faded ink in her old address book, Paul Whitaker, scrawled in Harold's handwriting beside a now landline-looking number. But when she dialed it, a cell rang on the other end. After 2 tones and a pause, someone answered. "Yeah?" The voice was rough, cigarette-stained, cautious. "Paul, it's Nora. Nora Jennings." A long breath. "Nora? Huh. Well, I'll be damned. You still in the house on Jasper?" "Still mine," she said, then added, "Let's not pretend we're catching up." Another silence. "You got the envelope," he said finally. "I got it. And I saw the signature, yours allegedly." Paul laughed, short and humorless. "Figures. Did you know Jason was filing with your name on it?" "Number. He called me a few weeks ago. Said you were slipping, said Harold left everything to the family and you were cutting everyone out in favor of strangers. Said there might be some leftover if I helped pressure the court a little." Nora felt the warmth drain from her chest. She'd expected malice, but manipulation, crafted in her son's voice, hit deeper. "And you believed him." Paul sighed. "I believed the version I wanted. I don't have much left either. Not an excuse, just truth." She let that settle. Then she gave him the courtesy of her silence. "I'll pull my name," he said quietly. "Officially. And I'll write a statement to confirm he misled me." "That won't fix what he tried to do." "No," Paul agreed. "But maybe it stops what comes next." They ended the call without small talk. Some family ties don't need to be repaired. They just need to be released. Nora rang Ellen immediately. "That's 2 forged filings in 2 months, Ellen said. "This has crossed the line from civil to predatory." By sunset, Ellen had filed for harassment prevention on Nora's behalf. The paperwork included evidence of impersonation, prior medical manipulation, and a sworn affidavit from Paul himself. "We'll build the firewall higher," Ellen said. And Nora? She went further. That night, she opened her secure folder and began drafting a new will. Not just amended, airtight. She included a second legal review clause, a third-party trust monitor. A secondary executor should Ellen become incapacitated. She revoked any contingent clauses tied to biological heirs. No legal oxygen left in the document. Nothing for Jason to twist. When she finished, she uploaded it to the secure vault again, but this time she didn't stop there. She emailed it to Dr. Arnett, to her banker at the credit union, to the lawyer who had helped with Harold's VA claim, She emailed it to Dr. Arnett, to her banker at the credit union, to the lawyer who had helped with Harold's VA claim, to her goddaughter in Oregon. 4 trusted third parties, all with clean digital footprints and no connection to Jason. A fortress by way of file sharing. It was past midnight when she exhaled, the kind of release that came not from relief, but readiness. The next morning, she walked, not for distance, for proof, down the block, past the Keegans' tulip bed, across the little wooden bridge near the park where she and Harold used to walk after Sunday brunch. Her steps were slow but precise. Her walker thudded against the sidewalk rhythmically, like punctuation. A young couple jogged past her, earbuds in. A dog barked behind a fence. Somewhere a lawnmower buzzed. Life moved forward, and for the first time in a long time, so did she. She paused at the top of the hill and looked back toward her home, her house. It was no longer under siege. It stood like she did, weathered, recentered, still owned. She turned to walk again when her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. One new message. No name. Just a number she didn't recognize. The preview read, "You really think this ends with paper? You've still got things I want." Nora didn't flinch. Not now. She stared at the message, pressed save, then kept walking. The message went unanswered. Nora didn't block the number. She didn't reply either. She simply archived the text, slid the phone back into its drawer, and locked it. She had more pressing things to do. On Monday morning, she sat at her kitchen table, sunlight spilling across a neat stack of printed applications. The scholarship fund's first round had opened quietly. Just a few flyers posted at local hospitals, a mention in the Tri-County Nursing Alumni newsletter. She expected maybe a dozen responses. Instead, she had 32. Each application bore a photo, a transcript, and a personal letter. Nora read them all slowly, deliberately, with the same attention she used to give to patient charts, looking not just for good grades or tidy sentences, but for heart. By the fourth letter, her eyes were damp. By the ninth, she'd made a separate pile. Reread immediately. It was the 12th one that stopped her cold. It came from a second-year nursing student at Xavier named Janelle Whitaker. No relation to Paul, as far as Nora could tell. 24 years old, studying while caring for her grandmother, who had Alzheimer's. Her essay was handwritten, not typed, 3 pages, ink slightly smudged in the corners. "I want to work in palliative care because too many people die in places that forget they were ever fully alive." Nora read the line twice, then folded the letter closed and held it against her chest. Later that afternoon, she dialed the number listed at the top of the application. A pause, then a voice picked up, surprised and tentative. "Hello? Is this Janelle?" "Yes. Who's—" "This is Nora Jennings. I read your letter, and I'd like to meet you, in person, if that's all right." Janelle hesitated only a second. "Of course. I'd be honored." They agreed on lunch. Neutral ground, a quiet diner on the edge of town that served real iced tea and still used cloth napkins. Nora wore a burgundy blouse and her pearl earrings, the ones she hadn't worn since Harold's memorial. Janelle arrived early, hair pulled back in a neat bun, eyes a mix of nerves and fire. They talked for nearly 2 hours. Not about grades, not about finances, about patience, about grief, about what it meant to care for someone who would never thank you and love them anyway. "You remind me of someone I used to be," Nora said softly as they finished their pie. Janelle smiled. "And you remind me of someone I hope I become." They hugged on the sidewalk. Nora placed the folded acceptance letter into Janelle's hand and told her to open it when she got home. "Some things deserve to be unwrapped slowly," she said. Back at the house, Nora moved through the rooms like someone walking through a museum that belonged to her, not a relic of grief, but a gallery of new beginnings. She placed Janelle's essay in a frame right beside Harold's military portrait. Different generations, same fire. That night, Nora sat outside on the back patio. The wind chime Harold had installed years ago swayed gently in the breeze, its metallic tones soft and irregular. Not perfect, but honest. She sipped chamomile tea and looked up at the stars. Not searching, just present. She hadn't forgotten Jason's message. She just no longer answered to fear. Nora sat at her desk with a yellow legal pad, the kind Harold used to balance their checkbook after retirement. The pen in her hand felt heavier than usual, not because of age, but because of finality. She wasn't just doing math, she was closing chapters. The numbers were honest. Pension, modest savings, the equity in the house. The scholarship fund was secure, and Janelle's first year was covered in full. But there was still more. Not a fortune, but enough to give without keeping score. She circled the figure, drew a line beneath it, and wrote, "Legacy should outlive fear." That afternoon, she met with a young social worker at the community center, Melanie Reyes. Early 30s, bright-eyed, the kind of woman who listened with her whole posture. She was helping coordinate resources for older adults navigating guardianship manipulation, and Ellen had recommended her as a possible secondary contact on Nora's POA documents. They talked over coffee in the center's garden. Nora asked her questions, serious ones. Melanie answered everyone without flinching. No performative empathy, no condescension, just clarity. "You've seen this before," Nora said. Melanie nodded. "More than I'd like, less than I expect." By the end of their meeting, Nora had her notary form signed. Melanie Reyes would now stand in line behind Ellen. A quiet shield in case the unexpected ever knocked again. Back home, Nora opened her desk drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside, her will, its latest revision, the notarized POA, the medical directive, the letters to Janelle, Dr. Arnett, Ellen, and now Melanie. She added one more page, not a legal document, a letter, but this one wasn't addressed to anyone else. It began, "To the version of myself who stayed quiet for too long, you did the best you could. You believed that loving someone meant accepting what they became. You thought enduring counted as loyalty. You didn't fail. You learned." She wrote for nearly an hour. About the guilt that came from turning love into responsibility. About the slow erosion of identity when no one in the house says your name with respect. About the aching gap between memory and reality. And finally, about peace. Not as something granted, but something claimed. You stopped waiting for apologies. You stopped hoping for someone to notice you were shrinking. You planted your feet. You got louder. You became the keeper of your own name again. She signed it, Nora Jennings, June 2025. Then she folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the same folder that had once held her marriage certificate. Later, she stood in the living room and let the quiet settle around her. It wasn't absence anymore. It was room. Room to breathe, to think, to decide. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt honest. The following morning, she donated another $5,000 to a local elder advocacy nonprofit. She didn't tell anyone. No naming rights, no letters of acknowledgement, just a wire transfer and a note that read, "For the ones still unheard." She sat on the front porch afterward, watching the neighborhood shift. A teenager zipped by on a skateboard. A mother herded two toddlers into a minivan. Life moved in wide arcs. She stayed still, but steady. The mail arrived at noon. A white envelope, formal, from the mediation center. Dispute resolution attempt. Estate of Nora Jennings. Nora opened it, half expecting more forged claims, more bureaucratic snarls. But it wasn't from Jason. It was from a name she didn't recognize, a legal rep for an anonymous family interest. Nora folded the letter slowly. Her fingers didn't shake. Someone was still fishing. It was just past 6 when the knock came. Not frantic, not casual, just expectant. Nora didn't answer right away. She finished folding the dish towel in her hand, smoothed it over the oven handle, and walked, unhurried, to the front door. Through the peephole, Jason. He stood with both hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, like a man posing as humility. His hair looked damp, as if he'd tried too hard to look casual or clean. Nora opened the door halfway, the chain still engaged. "Hey, Mom." She didn't respond. "I got the letter," he said. "From mediation, I know about the new will. About Paul. Everything." Still, she waited. Let the weight sit in the space between them. Jason shifted. "Look, I know I messed up. I didn't come to fight. I'm not asking for the house or money or any of that anymore. I thought maybe we could talk. Or, I don't know, reset?" Nora blinked slowly. "You want forgiveness?" He nodded. "Yeah. I mean, if you could find it. Even a little." She studied his face. not the features she once recognized in baby photos, but the older scaffolding built around them, the opportunism tucked behind tired eyes, the sadness that always came a step too late to matter. "You're not in the will," she said evenly. "You're not in the house. And you're not in control anymore." Jason flinched. "I know. You're all I have left." Nora let the words settle. Then learn how to treat all like something worth keeping." He looked past her into the house, at the soft light spilling from the lamp in the corner, the vase of tulips on the console table, the framed letter from Janelle beside Harold's portrait. "I just thought," he murmured, "it'd be different." "It is," she said. "I'm different." Jason took a half-step back. "So that's it?" She gave him one final look. Not cruel, not indulgent, just full of something rare. Clarity. "That's it," she said, and closed the door. The bolt slid into place with a clean, decisive sound. Nora stood for a moment behind the door, her hand on the knob. No tears came. No shaking. Her breath was even, her spine upright. She turned and walked back through the hallway, her steps slow and sure, the walker barely making a sound over the new rug. Later that night, she sat at her desk and opened her journal. One final entry. June 30th. He asked for forgiveness. I gave him the only mercy I had left, the truth. She closed the journal. Outside, the streetlights blinked on. Somewhere, wind touched the chimes again, an old echo, light and distant. Nora poured herself a glass of water, sipped slowly, and smiled, not with triumph, but with something sturdier. Peace, not loud, not fragile, earned. She moved to the armchair in the living room and pulled the throw blanket over her legs. The clock ticked. The night settled, and in the quiet, she whispered aloud, "He said I slowed everything down, but I got where I needed to go, and he never caught up."